Journey to the Past, Chapter 2, Part 3. Izuku knows what names some of his classmates will choose before anyone else. Maybe he knew their names before the heroes themselves, the small, child versions of the heroes, had even decided. Asui would have been 6 when Froppy plucked Izuku out of the floodwaters and introduced herself for the first time. Had she decided on her hero name then? Had she even known that she wanted to be a hero? But Izuku doesn't know what most of his classmates will choose. Picking hero names is an exciting part of any hero course, but Izuku feels as though he's being introduced to his childhood friends for the second time. Or, maybe, like he's unlearning all the wrong guesses he made as a kid. The class swells with tension when Midnight calls for them to present their names, until Aoyama flounces up to the teacher's desk and announces, "Shining hero, I cannot stop twinkling." Izuku blinks. The rest of the class muffles their snickers behind their hands. He's not being introduced to his hero friends for the second time, he realizes. These are still his classmates, his friends, his fellow 15-year-old students who don't know the first thing about choosing hero names. The names picked today may not be the names they use 10 years from now. Ashiro is next. Alien Queen! Midnight shoots her down, and she goes back to her seat, dragging her heels. Izuku chokes down a hysterical burst of laughter and tries to school his face into something he hopes is neutral. From the concerned look Sero shoots him, he hasn't managed it. "It's a good name," Ashiro mumbles under her breath, and Izuku knows she will still be sour about it 10 years in the future. Kirishima becomes Red Riot. Izuku is busy berating himself for how close he got to guessing the correct name, 1 word off, and so he almost misses Kachan smacking a hand on the desk in front of him. "Huh? What the fuck kind of name is that?" The smile slips off Kirishima's face. "You don't like it, Bakugo?" "What about Rocky?" Kachan asks. "Such a cutesy name from Bakugo?" Kaminari asks. "Didn't know you had it in you, dude." "Rocky is a good name if you're trying to appeal to young kids," Midnight says. Or Americans. But Red Riot is a great name too, especially if you're going to continue the color theme you currently have with your hair and costume. "Rocky is super manly," Kirishima agrees, "but I've always wanted to pay homage to Crimson Riot, you know? He's the person that inspired me to be a hero in the first place. Sorry, bro." Kachan slouches down in his seat and mumbles something about Rocky being logical rather than cute and being a great name for a hardening hero and how none of them know anything. Izuku scribbles down each name as they're presented. Cellophane, and Tailman, and Pinky, and Charge Bolt, and Anima. He'll add them to his journal tonight. He no longer has to refer to his friends as the made-up names he made when he was a child. He has real names. He managed to guess Invisible Girl right. He still thinks Black Raven and Shift Hands are better hero names than Tsukuyomi and Tentacle, though. Maybe he can subtly suggest them to Tokoyami and Shoji during lunch. Yellow Mike can finally be crossed out and replaced with Sugarman. Kachan is still struggling with a name, which makes Izuku feel better about being stuck, too. Uraraka's name is perfect. After she smiles shyly and introduces herself as Iravity, Izuku's not sure how he referred to her as Floaty Girl for 10 years. It doesn't fit her. Iravity is perfect. Todoroki names himself Shoto. Izuku imagines suggesting that Todoroki take up the name Ice Prince, imagines just saying the words Ice Prince out loud to Todoroki's face, and ducks his head to hide his blush. Ida's whiteboard says Tenya. Izuku doesn't know how to help him. He wishes he did. He wishes he had a name to suggest, but now Almost Ingenium seems sour and offensive after what has happened to Ida's brother. And then it's his turn, and he becomes Deku. A choice he makes himself this time. A murmur spreads through the class like ripples across a still pond, but Izuku stays firm. This is his name. This is the kind of hero he will become. Kachan looks up from where he was furiously scribbling hero names onto his whiteboard. Izuku had half expected him to fly across the room and smack the board out of his hand, but he doesn't. Kachan remains in his seat. His face is oddly still. When Izuku sits back down, Kachan glances at him over his shoulder. Izuku lays his whiteboard flat on his desk and makes himself stay there, rather than shrinking away. "Deku?" Kacchan doesn't say the word like it's an insult, the way he's said it for 10 years. He says it like he's trying it out, testing the way it feels in his mouth. Yeah, Izuku says. Deku. Deku, Kacchan says once more, and then scoffs, a barely audible noise even to Izuku, and turns back around to keep brainstorming on his whiteboard. Todoroki starts sitting with them at lunch. Izuku has to stop himself from staring, even more than he had before, when he was still trying to piece together why his class was full of childhood friends. A week after the sports festival, Izuku wets his lips and says, "Have you ever thought about growing your hair out, Todoroki?" Todoroki lowers his chopsticks. "No, I haven't. What if it gets in my face?" "You could tie it back," Izuku says. His face feels hot. His cheeks must be bright pink. "You could braid it or put it in a ponytail or a bun. It would look nice. I mean, your hair is so unusual, so of course, not unusual, that sounds really mean, more like, unique? Yes, unique. Growing it long would look really, really good." Izuku wants to cram the words back into his mouth. He wants to work out how his classmates managed to time travel so he can go back a few minutes and choke himself out. Todoroki touches his fringe. "It's something to think about, I suppose." "I think you'd look great," Uraraka says. "Very handsome." "Midoriya is right," Ida says. "With such an interesting two-toned color, it would look very striking grown out. It might increase your marketability as a pro-hero. We aren't just our costumes, after all. Our image is composed of our body language and word choice and even our hairstyles." That's a good point. So you will?" Izuku asks. "Maybe," Todoroki says. Izuku nods and stuffs his mouth with his lunch so he won't have to reply verbally. Under the table, Uraraka kicks him. She's smirking at him. It's a knowing smirk. It makes Izuku sweat more than he already is. "Don't," Izuku tells her. Uraraka raises her hands defensively. "I didn't say anything." Izuku had thought the days of his hero friends swooping in to save him, the way they had been saving him since he was little, were over, but he was wrong. They were still there to save him, but now they weren't grown-up heroes who navigated fights easily. They were his friends, and this time Izuku can fight by their side. After Stain, Ida accepts the name Ingenium. Kacchan and Todoroki are still undecided on their names, but that's okay. They'll get there. He sees Shinso at lunch and on his way to class. He lets Izuku sit with him every now and then, but he doesn't fully trust Izuku. Not yet. "I don't feel like you're equal," Shinso says from the other side of the table, sitting stiffly between Asui and Uraraka. They're both doing their best to make him feel welcome, but they're here because Izuku has asked them to be, and Shinso knows that. Uraraka puts down her chopsticks and says, "Sometimes it feels as though my classmates are too far ahead of me, and that might create feelings of inequality if I thought too hard about it, but I'm choosing instead to let it inspire me to do better." Uraraka glances at Izuku when she says this. Asui says, "Yes, I know what you mean, ribbit." "What?" Izuku says. They ignore him. "It's not the same," Shinso says. "You're in the same class, the same course. I'm not even at the starting line yet." "That's not true," Izuku tries. "Then when you're at the starting line," Uraraka says, picking her chopsticks back up and twirling them the way he's seen her twirl a bow staff on the rare days Aizawa lets them try out non-lethal weapons from the support course. "When you're transferred into our class, we should spar. If you're behind us, you should use it as motivation to catch up, right?" Uraraka said when, not if. When. Shinso doesn't miss that either. Some of the tension leaches out of his shoulders. "All right, but I won't go easy on you." Uraraka smiles, a frightening kind of smile that she's aimed at Izuku a dozen different times during hero training, and says, "I won't go easy on you either." Kacchan swings between hot and cold without warning. When they were younger, he would antagonize Izuku almost daily, only to ignore him for long stretches of time for no discernible reason. Ignoring Izuku after the run-in with the slime villain made sense, but the rest of it, the way he would blow up at seemingly innocent things, only to go silent the next day, the way he gravitated towards some of their classmates like he was starving for touch after years of sneering at the concept of friendship, the way he sometimes stared at Izuku as though he was trying to look straight through him, didn't make sense. Today, Kacchan is running hot. He had targeted Izuku during hero training and seemed to take vicious pleasure in scorching his suit until it was more black than green. Their classmates edged away from them like they were two bombs destined to set each other off. After class, an argument begins in the locker room and spills out into the halls until they were striding off to find somewhere they could yell at one another without a teacher giving them detention. Ida shouts after him to not give in to Kachan's antagonism, but Izuku dodges around him and follows Kachan deeper into the school. Izuku is not the same quirkless kid that flinched under Kachan's stare, and Kachan's not the same person that burned holes in his elementary school uniform, even if it sometimes feels like he is. They both have a long way to go, and they'll get nowhere if they keep avoiding one another. His childhood friends taught him that. Maybe not in words, but in the way they avoided his questions and turned to leave him after every attack, only ever staying, only ever revealing something about themselves after Izuku chased after them. The other classes are getting out for lunch. They dodge around the general education students and head around the back of the building, towards the empty space behind one of the gymnasiums. As soon as they get there, Kachan throws Izuku up against one of the walls. Izuku's hand wraps around his wrist. He won't let himself be burnt. Not this time. "Who the fuck are you?" Kachan asks, almost desperate beneath the razor wire anger. "Kachan," Izuku begins, clenching his teeth. "I know you don't like me, but what the fuck do you think you're doing?" Shinso has a bundle of textbooks under one arm. He should be heading to lunch and squeezing in extra study time between bites, not standing here, glaring at Kachan like he's working out how to take him apart. Uraraka peers out from behind him. She seems almost sheepish, half hidden behind him, but the second her gaze lands on Kachan, holding Izuku up against the wall, all the timidness drains out of her. She straightens, face like stone, and she's a future hero again, not a 16-year-old girl. "Put him down," she says. "Get the fuck out of here," Kachan tells Uraraka, not looking at Shinso. So he does know who Shinso is, then. "This is between me and Deku. You extras can fuck right off." "Is that so?" Shinso asks. Kachan still ignores him. "You fucking follow us, round face?" "Yeah," she says. "Shinso saw me and asked what was wrong. I must have looked worried. Not sure why, though. It's not like I was worried my best friend was going to get hurt by the biggest bully at UA. "Uraraka," Izuku tries. "I'm not going to..." Kachan cuts himself off. He pushes away from Izuku and shoves his hands into his pockets. A peace offering. "We were going to have a conversation. Like adults. Now fuck off." Izuku isn't sure he's ever had a mature, level-headed conversation with Kachan before. Shinso and Uraraka seem to share his doubt. They both look like they're ready to jump into a fight with Kachan, one of the most powerful students in their grade, if he attempts to hurt Izuku. It's a heady thought. No one has ever intervened before. But even steeled for a fight, ready to defend Izuku, they don't look like the operator or floaty girl. They're dressed in their school uniforms. Uraraka's hair is damp from the showers and her tie is lopsided, like she dressed in a hurry. Shinso has his books. They're not in their hero costumes. Shinso doesn't even have a hero costume yet. And they're not stronger than their opponent. They're not 20-something years old. They're young and inexperienced and burning up with anger on Izuku's behalf. Like this, they may not be Izuku's childhood heroes, but they're still his friends. Friends he can keep. Friends who won't disappear. "I'm not doing this with you here," Kachan says. "Good," Shinso says. "Let's all go back. We're missing lunch." Kachan opens his mouth to argue, but a bang echoes from the other side of the gymnasium. Izuku has sparred enough times to know what it sounds like when someone is thrown into UA's reinforced walls. Someone flings out swear words and then the bang comes again, louder this time. Izuku is sprinting around the gymnasium before he can think to tell someone to run for a teacher. It's been so long that he thinks it's his classmates at first. The costumes are similar, but their builds are wrong, too tall and broad and muscled to belong to a teenager. He doesn't recognize the villain, but he recognizes earphones slumped below a dented wall, spitting blood and expletives into the dirt, and Red on top of the villain, handcuffing him with practiced ease below a second, even larger dent. His friends round the corner after him. Uraraka and Shinso freeze. Uraraka makes a choked noise in the back of her throat, and Shinso says, "What the actual fuck?" Kachan surveys the scene and then says, "Thought you two had up and died." Earphones in Red look up. Earphone Jack and Red Riot, Izuku corrects. He knows their hero names now. He knows their real names, too. He knows what they look like first thing in the morning, trudging down the dorm stairs with bedhead, shoving toast into their mouths before class. He had gotten the first part of their hero names right, Izuku supposes. He'd had half the puzzle pieces. Now he has the full picture. An almost full picture, anyway. "Shit," Earphone Jack says. Red Riot says. "Hey guys, how are you?" "How are you?" Earphone Jack repeats. "Really? That's what you're going with?" "What else am I supposed to say?" Red Riot asks. Earphone Jack considers this. She stands up, ignoring the blood dripping out of one corner of her mouth, and waves her hand in the air. "These are not the droids you're looking for." "Wow," Kachan says flatly. "I didn't know you liked old school pop culture," Izuku says. Earphone Jack shrugs and fiddles with one of her ears. "My girlfriend is secretly a big nerd and got me into them." Uraraka's voice climbs in pitch with every word. Can someone please explain what's going on?" Earphone Jack squeezes her eyes shut and rubs at her temple. "Fred, you do it." Red Riot climbs off the bound villain and dusts dirt off his suit pants. He glances at the teenagers and opens his mouth. Closes it. Thinks for a moment. "You're having a dream," Red Riot says. "A joint dream. Together. None of this is real." Shinso crosses his arms. "Nice try, but no." "You're hallucinating?" Red Riot tries. "No," Shinso says. Red Riot pauses again. He's thinking so hard that his face scrunches up. Then he clicks his fingers and points at them. "We were hit by a weird quirk that aged us up. Yeah, that's it. We're your regular classmates that were changed by a quirk." "For some reason, I don't believe you," Shinso says. "It's time travel," Kachan says. His voice is level, unbothered. Izuku thinks he must look like Uraraka, staring at Kachan, mouth open, because Kachan looks at them and scowls. "What's with the dumb faces?" Izuku pushes past Shinso and Uraraka, still staring at Earphone Jack and Red Riot and Kachan, and trying to make sense of it all, and shoves Kachan up against the wall. Kachan's hands go around his wrist. He doesn't push Izuku away. Faint explosives detonate in his palms, enough to tingle, but not enough to hurt. A warning. "You knew," Izuku says through his teeth, hands buried in Kachan's uniform shirt. "All these years, and you knew." "Get the fuck off me, Deku," Kachan says. "I didn't know the whole time, alright?" "But for years, for at least a few years, you've known about my friends. You were... God." Izuku drops Kachan and backs up a few steps. "You met them too." Kachan shoves his shirt down to smooth out the wrinkles Izuku's hands have left. He doesn't look at Izuku when he says, "Yeah, I did." Izuku tries to grab him again, but Red Riot grabs him around the waist and hoists him into the air. "Slow down there, little dude," Red Riot says. "Don't go starting a fight right now. I'll put you in timeout if I have to." Izuku tries to squirm out of Red Riot's hold, but he's an adult, an experienced pro-hero, and he holds him tight. Earphone Jack sighs. "Why do you have to be so fucking high maintenance, Midoriya?" "Me?" Izuku says. "What about Kachan, since apparently you knew him as a kid too?" Kachan bares his teeth at him. It's a strangely calm action for him. If Izuku were trying to attack him in a classroom setting, Kachan would be fighting back. In the presence of their adult classmates, Kachan seems subdued almost. Tempered. "Do you promise to behave?" Red Riot asks. Izuku would say that he sounds like a teacher, but if Izuku were trying to pick a fight with Kachan in front of Aizawa, then Aizawa would probably string him up by his toes, not hold him in this gentle grip and talk to him so softly. Izuku sags in Red Riot's hold. "Fine, I promise." Red Riot sets him down on the ground, and then, like he can't stop himself, he ruffles Izuku's hair. Uraraka seems to have gotten over her shock. She bounces around Earphone Jack and Red Riot. Shinso watches on, even as he hangs back. He's less energetic than Uraraka, but his gaze is sharp, taking in every detail about the future heroes. "Are we still friends in the future?" Uraraka demands. "Do we all become pro-heroes? Where are you on the hero ranks? Where am I? Is anyone in the top 10? Red Riot laughs. You're almost as bad as Katsuki was. Uraraka glances at Kacchan. He shoves his hands in his pockets. What? Random heroes kept appearing out of thin air and saving me but wouldn't tell me their names, and you think I wasn't going to have a shit ton of questions? Wait, Izuku says. Who was worse, me or Kacchan? He can't believe he's asking this. He can't believe that his childhood friends don't just belong to him. This whole time, they've belonged to Kacchan, too. Katsuki, Red Riot says. Earphone Jack screws up her face, like the memory of their younger selves is painful. Yes, but Midoriya is more of a nuisance. Bakugo kept trying to tackle us and scream questions at us, but Midoriya would run at the villains. It's hard to look after an inexperienced preteen when they're waving a red flag at villains. All eyes jump to Izuku. Izuku says. I never did that, Kacchan says, and he glances at Red Riot as though expecting to be praised for not hurling himself at villains when he was a child. Red Riot smiles. I know, buddy. Good work. Izuku manages to catch Shinso's eyes. His eyebrows are raised, as if to say, Are you seeing this? Izuku shrugs back, just as bewildered. This explains so much, Uraraka says. Deku, you were so jumpy during the first few weeks of term. I thought you were nervous about entering UA, because I was nervous too, but then we started hero training and I realized you were even more nervous around the students than you were actually fighting or talking to the teachers, and I thought maybe it was social anxiety, but you were still just so... odd, Shinso volunteers. He was acting like a fucking freak, Kacchan says. Earphone Jack cuffs him around the ear and he bares his teeth at her, but doesn't retaliate or even curse her out. You were a little strange, Uraraka tells Izuku, apologetic. I thought it was just your personality for a while, too. I would never have thought it was because you were recognizing some of our classmates who had time-traveled and met you as a kid. Wait. Shinso drops his books and they land in the dirt with a loud thud, kicking up dust. He grabs Izuku by the shoulders. The first time we met, you tried to make friends with me, even though I was declaring war on the hero course. That was because it wasn't the first time we had met, wasn't it? Izuku says. Oh my god. Shinso releases Izuku and steps away. He shoves his fingers through his hair. It sticks up under the stressed grip of his fingers. Oh my god. I thought you were aggressively nice or just stupid, but you recognized me. I time-traveled too, which means... Shinso goes quiet. He rubs a hand over his mouth like he's scared the words will escape without his consent. Uraraka looks from Shinso to Izuku to the grown-up versions of their friends with wide eyes. Did I also... We really fucked this up, Earphone Jack says. Ida is going to lecture us for hours, Red Riot agrees. I time-traveled? Uraraka chokes out. She whirls on Izuku and he instinctively steps away from the feral look in her eyes. Deku, did you recognize me at the entrance exam? Well, Izuku begins and then stops. He has no idea what to say. Aizawa talked about maintaining the timeline, but now Shinso and Uraraka know that there are time travelers in their class. That isn't Izuku's fault, technically. Uraraka whirls on Kacchan. He shrugs at her. I don't know shit, round-face. I never met you as a kid. Uraraka turns back to Izuku. Deku! Her hands twitch by her sides. He has a vision of himself floating up into the air and over the gymnasium and never coming down again. Izuku swallows. You might have time-traveled. Yes, you both did. Shinso sits down, right there in the dirt, next to his pile of textbooks. He's gone white as a sheet. I'm a hero, he says. Kacchan rolls his eyes. You're not a hero yet, jackass. You're 16. But I am in the future. Shinso looks to Izuku for confirmation. If I traveled back in time, I would have done so as a hero. You know me. You've met me when I was a hero. Ida isn't going to lecture us, Earphone Jack says to Red Riot. He's going to fucking murder us. Red Riot makes a face like he's already imagining what his murder at the hands of an adult Ida will feel like, and nods. Probably. Shinso stares up at Izuku from his place in the dirt. This is more painful than their match at the sports festival had been, when Izuku's childhood friend had spat insults at him. It hurts more than when the operator had hugged him goodbye after buying him bubble tea and then turned a corner and disappeared, as though he were never there in the first place. Because Izuku has been there. He has sat on the ground like this, staring up at All Might, so desperate to be told that he could be a hero that he felt as though he was going to implode. Yes, Izuku says. I met you when I was 10. You were an adult, a hero, and you saved my life. Shinso puts a hand over his mouth, like he's trying to stop himself from throwing up, and Kachan whirls on Izuku. You can't go giving out that kind of information, Kachan snaps. Time travel is fucking delicate. He reaches out to grab Izuku, but before he can touch him, Aizawa's capture weapon encircles his wrist and tugs him back. Everyone tenses up, even Earphone Jack and Red Riot. Lunch has ended, Aizawa says, eyes burning red. All Might hovers behind him, mouth hanging open, but no sound comes out. Why aren't you all in class? We got sidetracked? Uraraka offers. Aizawa looks over their heads at the adult version of his students. Kirishima, he says. Jiro. Hello again, sir, Red Riot says. Earphone Jack gives a small wave. You have all been careless, Aizawa tells the adults. Bakugo is right. Time travel isn't something to be used indiscreetly. Time travel? All Might says. Is that really... Yes, Aizawa cuts in. He releases Bakugo and glares at them. It's time for a talk. Red Riot and Earphone Jack make to follow Aizawa, and he holds up a hand to stop them. He doesn't say anything. He stares at them, flat and exhausted all at once, and they step back. Right, Red Riot says. Time travelers probably shouldn't be seen walking around campus. We'll go. I would scold you for not wearing disguises, voice modulators, or even masks when time traveling and talking to people from the past, but at this point the damage has been done. You're lucky that there are people who clean up after negligent time travelers. Red Riot's shoulders slump, and Earphone Jack winces. Apparently, Aizawa's scolding will never stop being effective, even when his students have grown up. Kachan bristles and opens his mouth like he's going to defend their friends, but Izuku interrupts him. There are? Who? I can't tell you that, Aizawa says. Time travel is a sensitive and often classified subject. And no, you can't talk to the agents who deal with time travelers. I doubt my old contacts even work. Old contacts? Izuku's thoughts jump to their conversation a few days after the USJ attack, when Aizawa had pulled him aside, exhausted but unsurprised by the idea of a class full of time travelers. Izuku figures it out a moment before Shinso blurts out, You're a time traveler. They turn to look at Shinso. He's no longer sat on the dirt, looking as if the world was rearranging itself around him, but his hair is messier than usual and his slacks are coated with a thin layer of dirt. By his side, Uraraka looks as though she's hyped up on too much caffeine, jittery and dangerously over-energized. Izuku had 11 years to adjust to the mysterious heroes who continually dropped in on him, and then months to come to terms with his classmates being time travelers. Uraraka and Shinso have only known for about an hour. How did you figure it out? Aizawa asks. Don't fucking tell me you met time travelers as a kid, too, Kachan says to Shinso. Shinso shakes his head, no. You're calm, sir. You're normally calm, but when it comes to something that might endanger your students, you're usually more alert than this. You didn't question if something had happened to Kirishima or Jiro, like an age-accelerating quirk or shapeshifters. You knew it was time travel immediately. You knew they were here to help. You knew it wasn't something to be concerned about. Perceptive, Aizawa says. When? Kachan demands. When did you time travel? It wasn't for either of you, Aizawa says. There was a high-risk mission a few years ago. The few heroes in the know were clamoring for a chance to go back, but none of them were discreet. I volunteered. The person's life was vitally important to the timeline, and at the time, I had thought our lives were different enough that we wouldn't meet. Aizawa turns and heads to the building full of classrooms before they can question him any further. All Might stands in the shade of the gymnasium, blinking at Aizawa's retreating form. Had thought, All Might echoes. Wait. Wait! Aizawa, come back! Aizawa marches them up to an empty classroom. They sit in the front row while Aizawa perches against the teacher's desk. Even All Might folds himself into a too-small chair, staring up at Aizawa like he's never seen him before. I've already explained this to Midoriya and Bakugo, Aizawa says, ignoring the way Izuku spins in his seat to stare at Kachan. but the two of you can always do with a reminder, so I will say again, you cannot talk about time travel with anyone who doesn't already know. You shouldn't talk about it at all if you're in danger of being overheard. Time travel is tricky. There is a reason why time-related quirks are kept quiet. If just one villain successfully traveled back without being stopped, they could change the course of history. Time travel is kept from public knowledge so that no one is tempted to meddle with the timeline. Izuku raises his hand in the air, even though this isn't a class. Aizawa just looks at him, so Izuku lowers it and says, "You mentioned agents." "Time travelers can be sloppy," Aizawa says, and for some reason he's glaring at his 4 students as he says this. "Midoriya, Bakugo, you had heroes and villains traveling into your neighborhood for years. Do you think the public wouldn't notice something was amiss? There are people that clean up after your messes." Izuku picks at the graffiti etched into the side of the desk. He's missing class, he realizes belatedly. It feels like such a small thing in the wake of all that has happened today. It feels strange, too, to know that the people on either side of them are dealing with their own revelations. He grew used to dealing with this on his own for over a decade, and now Shinso and Uraraka are almost bouncing in their seats, and Kachan is slouched in his chair, unbothered by the lecture Aizawa is giving on the dangers of time travel. All Might is at the end of the row, his body leaning to one side, too tall to properly sit in a teenage-sized desk. His eyes are fixed to Aizawa's face. Aizawa is not looking at All Might. Aizawa talks to them in that no-nonsense, even tone and answers any questions they may have. He doesn't scold Shinso when he asks the same question twice, just repeats the answer a second time. He doesn't remind Izuku to pay attention when he stares out the window, staring at nothing, like he might do if Izuku zoned out in class. Eventually, Aizawa pushes away from the desk and says, "That's enough. Go back to your dorms. Keep your mouths shut, and if you have any questions or problems, you know where to find me." The students scramble out of their seats and head to the door. Kachan is the first one to leave, almost jogging out into the hall, but Izuku lags back. All Might is still sitting in that too-small desk. All Might spreads his hands over the wood. His hands are so big that his spread fingers span the full width of the desk. "Aizawa," All Might says. "Can we talk?" Aizawa sighs. "Yes, I suppose we have to." Izuku slips silently out of the classroom after his friends. He doesn't wait in the hallway for All Might. The two men have decades-old secrets to unravel. It could take a while. Izuku has his own conversation to have, anyway. End of Chapter 2, Part 3. Podficker's Notes. Another part of the reveal, so we finally figure out why Bakugo has been acting oddly and some of his weird interactions with Izuku. One particular thing I love about this part is Uraraka. Her characterization here is stellar, I think. I'm a particular fan of Uraraka being, like, borderline feral. The line when she's trying to get Izuku to answer whether or not she becomes a hero, and she stares at him, and Izuku like gets that vision of floating up above and like never coming back down. Yeah, she's definitely single-minded, and I love it when that focus of hers is turned and you see it reflected not just in like becoming a hero or saving money, but also in other things, because she is, when she puts her mind to something, there's no turning her off of it. This podfic was produced for Voice Team Mystery Box 2024 for the challenge Scavenger Hunt. I'm currently fulfilling the scavenger hunt for something related to Team Bear, a key to an unknown or forgotten lockpicks, a beverage container, my thermos, fun or whimsical shoes, my ice skates, a gift I've received, any holiday. Part of my recording setup uses a fleece blanket, which I received as a gift for my birthday several years ago. A little guy. I've got a little Dumbo octopus that was crocheted by my brother. and something I've made by hand, which is a knitted cowl I'm wearing right now. I really hope that you've been enjoying this as much as I have. If you have, please don't forget to let the original author know. If you've enjoyed this podfic, please let me know. Thanks for joining.